We've set a challenge for 2 history teachers from Aylesbury High School in Buckinghamshire. They're on their way to the historic village of Ashwell. The challenge is to create a lesson that investigates how the Black Death affected this village. The ingredients: a church that dates back to the 13th century, which contains medieval graffiti written at the time of the Black Death. And a box containing 3 resources specially chosen by experts. These are the vital components for their lesson. There's also 2 local historians who'll be on hand to offer their assistance. Milkman Peter Greener, who runs the local museum, and Shepherd David Short, a keen local historian.
All places have a history, and all places have an interesting history. It's a matter of finding out what's interesting about it.
But right now, neither teacher knows their destination or the topic.
Hartford, what's at Hartford?
Don't know.
Our 2 teachers are Ian Annett, Head of History, and Ian Ochiltree, an NQT.
I'm not your typical 22, 25-year-old NQT. I've got a lot of different experience behind me. What I do bring is my enthusiasm for my subject. I'm an enthusiastic historian.
For the challenge, Head of History Ian will be coaching NQT Ian.
For this experience, it was always going to be more about Ian and what he could do with that, with those objects. I mean, we work very closely together, and I forget he's an NQT.
Let's hope NQT Ian gets coached well, because by 2 p.m. this afternoon, he needs to be ready to teach.
OK, we've got a church plan.
A series of quotes.
It's 8:30 a.m. and our 2 history teachers are already looking for clues.
Agriculture may play quite a big part in this.
It's looking a lot like we're doing something about it.
For NQT Ian, it's his first time teaching outside his classroom.
It will be very interesting to see whether the strangeness of the situation, the fact that they're outside a classroom, whether that changes their approach to their learning.
This could be a challenge for everyone, teacher and pupil alike.
I haven't had a proper history lesson outside class, but the trips have just sort of added to our knowledge.
Because you're learning about it, but you don't get to see the sites that you're looking at. For example, we did castles, but you may not have seen one, or actually what you're writing about, you can't have seen it before.
I think we might be going to Ashwell.
I reckon. This is great, look at this.
Look at the size of that church here.
Yeah, it's a monster.
First stop in Ashwell is at local historian David Short's house.
We believe you can help us.
Well, I hope so. Come in.
Thank you. Ooh, box.
Yes, I've been asked to give you this key so that you can open this box.
Yeah, thanks.
Well,
Right. Wow.
Well, what?
Well, I can see something that says Black Death, which is going to be important.
We've got a DVD.
Watch me. Is there anything that says drink me?
How did the Black Death affect this
Ah,
village?
right, okay.
We're assuming that the Black Death affected the village.
we have some graffiti in the church.
Oh,
The
right.
church is
Okay,
made of
fantastic.
chalk and very easy to scratch.
Yeah.
And there's some graffiti there referring to the Black Death of 1349-50.
Right.
So we know that the Black Death affected the village itself.
These numbers then might refer to the location of the graffiti.
Yeah, because these are columns and they'd be quite easy to access, won't they?
Black Death picture. These are one of those fairly standard pictures of
Yep.
death visiting the ailing victim,
Yes.
comforted by the priest. And we have
Okay. Religious donation.
and we have a series of quotes, and these are contemporaneous. These are
No, it's Boccaccio on there.
These are 14th century
Yeah.
quotes. We may be asking the students to find a way to use these sources
Yeah.
in their understanding.
It's also going
Or-
to give them a sense of what people thought about it at the time. We've got symptoms, we've got causes.
We need to read these properly.
Yeah.
And a horseshoe. Horseshoe.
This could be movement. This
So-
could be migration, couldn't it?
Yeah.
This could be people getting on there,
Yeah.
not horses, but
An idea to have a look at the DVD
and then go on and have a look at the graffiti itself and see how it fits in.
The DVD holds some vital tips from the two experts who chose the resources. The quotations and the horseshoe have come from Muriel Jeter from the Museum of London.
I'm Muriel Jeter. I'm a curator here at the Museum of London. In our medieval gallery at the Museum of London, we have a big display about the Black Death. It's obviously a huge event, catastrophic event that affected Britain. The Black Death originally arrived in England, in Weymouth, in the summer of 1348. Of course, in medieval times, before the time of cars and so on, the major form of transport was on horseback. So this is why I've chosen this horseshoe, which I've chosen because it's symbolic of one of the ways in which the plague or the Black Death was spread. It was mostly spread by shipping around the coast and up rivers and so on. But one of the ways that it was also spread was via land along the roads. I mean, the effect on anywhere, a large city or a small town, would have been absolutely terrible. I mean, up to half the population could have died, and in some places more than half the population died. So if you can imagine, half of everybody you know and you see on a daily basis is just dying one by one by one, it must have been absolutely horrific. Because this is a real 14th century horseshoe, we can't actually lend it out for the programme to be used in the lesson. While we do let people handle objects, we only let them handle them in the museum with museum staff present. So for the first of the programme, you're using modern horseshoe, which is going to be a symbol of this 14th century one. I've chosen another thing which isn't an object. It's a list of quotes, original quotes about the Black Death written by people at the time. And the reason I've chosen this is because I think it's so important to try and understand how people saw the Black Death when it was occurring. Some of them say things like, dreadful fire descended from heaven.
We identify that, didn't we?
And caused by the sins of men. I really think it would help the children to imagine what it would be like if they were living back in 1348 and these events were happening to them.
The things that we got were actually quite straightforward. The horseshoe was the most ambiguous one.
The quotations, which sort of rooted us in some sort of historical scholarship that was always going to be useful.
The final resource, a reproduction of a page from a medieval manuscript, has been contributed by Roger Walsh from the British Library.
Despite medieval manuscripts being the best record we have of the Middle Ages, there's surprisingly little specific illustration around the Black Death. But what we've chosen here is a manuscript that dates a little bit after the Black Death itself of, say, 1350, but which deals with the medieval relationship to death. And this illustrates perfectly one of the most fundamental moments in life in the Middle Ages. The moment of death was viewed as crucially important. I think there's a few ways an illustration like this could be used in a lesson. The first thing to do, I think, would be just to explore the source itself, to begin to look at the text that's around it. And this is a very interesting manuscript because it is written in Middle English. It's unfamiliar but familiar, and that's quite satisfying when you've worked it out. It's almost like decoding a puzzle in a way.
Though it be late, ere thou mercy came.
Did I read that as
Yeah, mercy thou shalt have. The picture, to me, was very evocative, and it's an image that I would have used in the classroom along with other images to try and draw out the religious nature of this disease.
But the picture very quickly gave us a sense of where this was going. And people's faith is so profound in those periods, profound enough to survive seismic shocks like the Black Death.
Before they set off, local historian David has some information about the church they're about to visit.
But the other thing is, as you walk into the church, you'll go through a lich gate.
Yeah.
And then on the left-hand side, you'll notice there's a triangle of ground there that is much higher than the rest, and there's no graves on it.
Is that a plague mound? Is that a plague
oral
death?
tradition has it that is the plague grave.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, that church
It's imposing, isn't it? It's really imposing.
And that's the third thing. We talked about, the church being for the girls as, they come into church and they're going to look at connect it to faith, and they're going to connect it to this graffiti that we're going to see. But the other thing they've got to get from it is just the scale of it, because it tells us a lot about this community.
This is called Arms Lane, so this is probably either the site of some alms houses or maybe an arms procession from the civic centre to the religious centre.
And this is the bit of high land he was talking about.
This bit here?
See how it's a bit higher?
Yeah. Plague victims were seen as often as victims of their own sin, so probably you wouldn't put them in consecrated ground. It is slightly more raised than the surrounding. This might be a good moment to link that religious character of the Black Death with its effects on the community. Okay.
Wow. Hello.
Oh, hello.
You look like you're coming to meet us.
I'm what they call a church welcomer.
Nice to meet you. I'm Ian.
Ian Hammett.
What a beautiful church.
Church.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful, yes, yes.
When does it date back to?
Well, what you can see is 12th, 13th century.
Interesting that it's 12th, 13th century, because you know our focus, I don't know if you know anything about our task, but our focus is obviously going to be on the impact of the Black Death here.
Yes, yes.
We have a map. I believe
yes.
you can show us some graffiti. And we've got a curious map with some references, which I would imagine are the points that we might want to look at. This will be familiar to you?
Yes. Those,
we met David, and he also said there's some graffiti around the tower.
Graffiti, the truly medieval graffiti relating to the Black Death are in the tower.
Well,
those are medieval scribblings about archdeacons and their shortcomings and things like that.
That might be useful to see anyway.
Well, they're rude about their archdeacons.
Yes.
I hope so.
Well,
we should definitely see it. If only for curiosity's sake, we should see it.
Fantastic.
Okay, let's have a look at the... So is this must be really famous.
Oh, it is, yes. Now that's the graffiti, but 2 courses below, you've got the most famous, and it's in a quite a beautiful early English hand. And it reads, some of it rather like the texts that people send on mobile phones, because a little bit's left out.
Yeah.
It is abbreviated.
So our student will decipher it immediately.
Absolutely.
Yes, yes.
And what does it say? Because
you've got the date, the MCT very large, and above that you've got pestilente, yes. There's a little line above the top, and that's their form of shorthand, motetta. And then underneath there's a record of the great storm which followed almost immediately. And there are lots of theories about it. Some people say, well, the tower was only half built and so they were standing on scaffolding. But most commonly, it's thought that they were going to keep a record of events, and that's why it starts at the top with the earliest, and then comes down. Of course, the mighty wind comes after the plague.
Yes, I see,
do they regard the mighty wind as the end of the plague? Is that is there some sense that they think that's what blows the plague away?
I think it does happen, because I think it does happen that this is what builds on their theory of miasma, that bad air causes the plague, and so you get this storm that blows it away.
Those theories last until 19th.
Yes, it did. Well, still into the 20th. When I saw the church, I was quite pleased for myself, because I've done some training in how to use a church as an artefact. So I was hoping that wouldn't interfere, and it's always hard as a mentor to let your mentee off the leash, and so I was hoping that I wouldn't step on Ian's toes too much and direct him.
The graffiti on the pillars, I just picked out a few which I thought were...
I'm a historian. I like old buildings and I like churches, so I was quite excited to get inside. Jenny was lovely. She was really helpful, very interesting.
Partly obscured by that, the archdeacon is an ass.
Oh,
it's very difficult to read.
Do we know when this is from?
Obscured is an ass. No, but it is medieval, late medieval.
I think when we started to see the graffiti, we saw the graffiti in the tower and on the pillars, and the range of resources in the printed sources dictated where we were going to go with the lesson, I think. So by the time we were in here and we were talking to Jenny, it was starting to take shape.
If you go to the museum, you'll find a very good display of artefacts, but they've also got a lot of documents, and Peter Greener is extremely knowledgeable. Right. There's hardly a question you can ask about Ashwell that he can't answer.
He sounds to be our man, then.
He's the man we need to talk to.
Yeah. Thank you, John.
But you've been very helpful as well.
you.
Thank you very much.